Welcome to the Tuesday edition of Juan's World, and today I'm going to take a look back at Easter Sunday. I've done a bit of video recording on Easter Sunday itself and also today, Easter Monday, because I did a fair amount of cooking, and unlike for my birthday, I actually cooked quite a fair bit and ate quite a fair bit. So the background here you see are Ukrainian Easter eggs from a collection that I used to have when I lived in New York. I lived near a Ukrainian migrant town called Glen Spey, where there's a beautiful Ukrainian church and a lot of Ukrainian immigrants. And at this particular juncture in world history, it's important to look at Ukrainian culture. So these are beautiful, beautiful eggs. Couldn't get any Easter eggs of any kind this year. Had to make do with these duck eggs, and I didn't dye them or anything. I just boiled one or two, and you'll see that later. And you'll also see this, my Easter Sunday meal, which was duck stuffed with lamb and with a mushroom sauce and roast potatoes. And then I also made a salad. I'll get into all of that when we get started. So step one is to make the stuffing, and what I've done is I've taken off the fat from a piece of lamb that I'm going to use to stuff the duck, along with a leek, a lot of garlic. I want tons of garlic in there, some lamb itself, some bread, and other odds and ends. I was going to incorporate some rosemary, but I decided against it. So it'll be good for the lamb, but not so good for the duck. So I'm just going to try out the fat now. I'm just melting down the fat. It's going to take a while. I've got it on very low heat. I want to get the fat out so that I can then just lightly saute some garlic and leeks, and then add chopped up lamb, and then stuff the duck with it. So this is some of the bones of the lamb that I'm just frying down a little bit because I want to get the meat off. I've got some extra meat already. I'm going to fry out the bones more and the fat a little bit more, and then I'm going to start putting together the stuffing. So now I've got the lamb, I've got some leeks, a lot of garlic, and a few hot peppers, and I'm just going to saute them all. And of course I've just run out of gas. Of course. So let me go get another cylinder and we'll start again. Well, I had to use my limited Khmer skills to get somebody to understand that I needed gas because the person who normally takes care of such things wasn't around because it's raining, I guess. This is the monsoon season and people don't always hang out where they're supposed to be, but I did finally get somebody to do it. So now I've got some gas again. And what I've got in here, just lightly sauteing in the lamb fat, the garlic leeks, some lamb chunks, a little bit of green and red pepper, Don't want to overdo things, but I just want to get it to the point where I can add some bread. In fact, I'm going to do that right now. It's just like a stuffing you would do for a chicken, except that it's not sage and onion. It's lamb and garlic. And I'm just going to do that. And meanwhile, whilst that's just on a very gentle saute, I'm going to show you over here. Here I've got the lamb bones that I sauteed before and the fat in a little bit of broth. I don't have it cooking right now because it's noisy. It's on the induction burner because I didn't have any gas and I wanted to get it moving. So I'm going to just make up some broth. I'm going to take what meat I can off the bones, put it in the stuffing, and then refrigerate overnight. So here's the stuffing with a little bit of broth added, and I'm just sauteing it a little bit, and then I'm going to refrigerate it overnight. So it's now early in the morning on Easter Sunday, and I'm just prepping the mushroom sauce that I planned. I've got a leek chopped up here and also an onion, and I'm just going to slowly caramelize them because I want to make a nice dark sauce. I'm going to use the lamb stock that I also used for the stuffing, but first I have to caramelize this mixture and then we'll get to it. What I've got here is a mixture of butter and olive oil that I'm sauteing everything in. I'm going to add some flour at some point so to make a dark roux, and then add the stock. Now, I've mentioned numerous times before, and I'll say it one more time, probably many more times, that the secret of caramelizing the onion family. Now, I've not included garlic in here because garlic doesn't do well when it takes on some color. I might add some garlic at some point, but I'm not going to do it now. But the thing about caramelizing onions, leeks, whatever, is to take your time. Just do it slowly. The cookbooks will sometimes say it takes 20 minutes. It's pushing it a little bit. It's more like 30, 35 minutes, or even slower. Just take your time and don't walk away, because when they start taking on color, it happens very quickly. So the leeks and onions are starting to caramelize nicely, so I'm adding some flour now in order to make my roux. So everything's going to brown together. Don't need to worry it too much, but I do need to pay attention. Very easy to go from brown to black. And as I always used to say to my friends in New York, ask me how I know. The number of sauces and the number of saucepans I have burned is more than I care to think about. So pay attention. Like, stay close. I'm going to turn this. This is what's called a blonde roux right now, for obvious reasons. I'm going to turn it into a dark roux. Not as dark as could be. And when you combine the caramelizing of the onions with the browning of the roux, you're actually talking about an hour on the stove. So It's a good job. It's a good job the propane ran out yesterday afternoon when I was still able to find someone to replace it. Actually turned out to be quite complicated because the guy who normally does it wasn't around. I couldn't find him. I just found some young guys who were, I guess, friends of his who were hanging out. And so I started off talking to them in English, which is foolish of me because they don't understand any English at all. So I had to switch to Khmer. And when you're asking somebody, can you replace my propane gas cylinder, that tests the limits of my Khmer. So what I ended up saying is I need to cook, which is something that I can easily translate into Khmer. And one of them looked kind of doubtful, and the other one, and so he got on the walkie-talkie that was sitting by the guard's desk and found the guy. And I got new propane, which is what I need because I don't want to be cooking at midnight and run out of propane. So I'm okay now. So let's just keep this going. I'm not going to keep the video going, but I'll come back when it has browned off nicely. Alright, so we're at the brown stage now, so I'm going to add the lamb stock that I made. Alright, so let me just heat that through. And I'm going to add some mushrooms. So it's a mixture of gravy and vegetable in one, which I like to do fairly commonly. These days I'm actually eating an awful lot of leafy greens and avocados because they're rich in potassium, and I discovered not too long ago when I was watching my weight but also watching the fact that my lower extremities were getting a little not bloated, but there was more fluid in them than I cared. It's what they call pedal edema in medicine, and that's usually a sign of heart disease, what they sometimes call chronic heart failure, CHF, and you know, so a little worrying. And I don't take in a lot of sodium. As you'll notice, I haven't put any extra salt in this sauce or the stock. But the thing is that you need a balance of potassium and sodium. So it's not just a matter of limiting your sodium intake, it's also a matter of increasing your potassium intake. And avocados are very rich in potassium, sorry. So are leafy greens, spinach, roquette, which is what I may make a salad out of. Not sure, there's an awful lot of food. I'll turn the heat up a little bit here just to get things going. So I've increased my potassium intake quite a bit, particularly with avocados. I eat one avocado a day. I also eat bananas, not quite so much because they're also rich in sugar, so they may cause an insulin spike, a sugar spike. But avocados and leafy greens, very good. I think on Easter Sunday, if I don't eat my avocado and my leafy greens, I'll be all right. But I also need to reduce my sodium intake. So now I'm just going to let this cook away and thicken, and then it will be ready for the meal later in the day. So now I'm going to get on to cooking the duck itself, and from now on it's going to be just stills, I'm afraid. Sorry, but first of all, roasting a duck doesn't really require video because it's just sitting in the oven roasting. There's not much to see, but also I was very frantic as the meal got closer in prep, so I had to just take some stills when I had the time. So if you've been watching my videos before, you will know that in Cambodia, and in fact in most of Asia in general, when you buy poultry, a duck or a chicken in particular, they're going to come with head and feet attached, and usually the inside is, if you're lucky, it's cleaned, but all the gizzards and heart and heart, liver, gizzard and so forth are inside, which is not, I guess, very different from in the United States. But sometimes I've bought a duck and it hasn't been cleaned at all. I have to just open up the belly and get everything out and clean it out and so forth. This one, all I had was the gizzard inside, but I did have to take off the head and feet, and what I did was I put them in a pot and I started to make stock, what I call quackaliki, which is like the duck version of cockaliki, that is duck and leeks, maybe some onions. And this time I'm just making a stock. I'm not really making a soup as such, but I got this started and I'll show you a little bit more later on. Now once I had got the duck prepared, then I had to put the stuffing in, and you'll see that I did it in two parts. Like half of it went into the duck itself. It's actually quite a small duck, not what I'm used to in the United States. Ducks in Cambodia tend to be rather small and rather scrawny, and this one, in fact, if I'd been a little younger and had bigger appetite, I would have eaten the whole thing. As it is, I ate half, and I was still a little bit hungry after I'd eaten half. So here it is with the stuffing prepared, and I also have the other half of the stuffing just in a aluminium foil bag. So I'm going to roast the duck with half the stuffing inside the duck itself and half outside, so that one will be very moist because the duck has a lot of fat, and the other will be quite dry, so there'll be a little contrast there. So I'm also going to prick the duck skin very thoroughly all over, because I want to get the fat out of the breast in particular. So I'm going to prick it all over. Now I'm also going to roast potatoes, and the way I'm going to do it, because of the way my oven works here, my ovens in Italy and in the United States and in Argentina were much hotter than this one. This one tends to kind of muddles around. It's supposedly 220 degrees centigrade at its hottest, but it rarely is. So what I do is I cut up some potatoes and I put them on to roast for half an hour before I even start the duck. So I'm doing that, then in goes the duck 20 minutes to 30 minutes later, and everything cooks for about 1 hour. So the roast potatoes are actually in there for about 90 minutes. They get really crisp on the outside and floury in the middle, and are just absolutely yummy. The duck was beautifully tender. I was really surprised. Normally Cambodian ducks are kind of tough. This one was really nicely tender, so I took off one breast and one leg portion and added the inside stuffing. I didn't actually use both stuffings this time because the inside stuffing was quite enough. Mushroom gravy, roast potatoes, done. It was delicious. And then along around tea time, the kind of time when the average Brit is thinking about some cake, I was a little bit hungry, so I made myself a salad. And this, as I mentioned earlier, is typical for me. It's roquette, arugula in the United States, or arugula in Italian, or rocket in British English, and avocado, very rich in potassium, which is what I was saying earlier, and then dressed with some spiced rice wine and extra virgin olive oil. So that was Easter. That was Easter Day. Couldn't do any more than that. Now it's Easter Monday, and I have stripped off the rest of the duck, put it in the remainder of the mushroom gravy, and I'm going to heat that through. That will be my lunch for Easter Monday. And I've also enhanced the quackaliki by taking the meat off the carcass. I was able to put the carcass in with the head and feet and the leeks and so forth to make a really rich stock, which you can see here. I'm not sure that I'll make it into a soup. I might. It's certainly not going to be today because I've got plenty to eat today. I'll make another salad probably later in the day. And finally I have this, which was my Easter Sunday dessert, which I never got to. It's a blackcurrant aspic and lychees with whipped cream. It's very nice, but it's way too rich for me these days, so just a little bit goes a very long way. So that's my Easter cooking. I hope you had or are having a joyous Easter time, and we're now going to be making the slow journey. We're still unpacking Easter, but now we're in the post-Easter season on our way to Pentecost. Pentecost is 50 days from Easter. So we'll talk about that on Friday, and meanwhile have a jolly good week, and I'll see you then.